apology to my friends from Dish. I left my book up here, and so you had cards dropping off the podium because there was no lip anymore. So anyway, so let's just get started. I want to tell you how this came about. I love, one of my rituals in the morning is I live pretty close to the Highline Canal, and I get up in the morning and I put on my Audible and I walk the Highline Canal like a maniac, and I put my Audible on at 1.5 speed because I can think faster than most people can talk. What I found was that's not true with Beth. So this was back in November, and I'm walking on the High Line, and every time Beth would say a sentence, I was finding myself, I want to clip that, I want to clip that. I literally was walking into shrubs. And I told Beth this story last night, and I thought, I came in the office the next day, and I said to Kelly, we've got to have Beth Comstock here for WIT. And, how do you do that? So we figured it out, and we figured it out by putting it out there. So I was in a board meeting, and this board member will remain nameless, but I was in the board meeting, and I mentioned I want Beth for WIT, and at a break, he came up and said, who's your second choice? And Beth talks about magical thinking, and I said, I don't have one. And I was thinking, oh gosh, do I sound disorganized? I should have a list this long like Santa's list. And he said, okay, let me work on it. I might be able to help you get to her. And within weeks, we were on the telephone call with you, and I will tell you that you said yes. And it wasn't until we received your headshot that in my brain, I could believe you said yes. It's like, thank you. So it's been a great work working with you. So we've read the book, and a few of us have gotten together. And one of the things that was, and you spoke about it in your 20 minutes, was courage, just to write the book. Beth talks about, we all know GE, and you started in the Jack Welch days and through Jeff Immelt, and that was also through all the disruption that we've seen in incumbent industry. So tell me about the courage it took to tell those stories.
Well, I guess I'm a storyteller, and so I was coming toward the end of my career, although as I said, it ended much more abruptly than I expected. But at the end of that part of my career. But I worked with a lot of people at our company, and I realized that they wanted to fight for better, and they needed some championship for courage, right? And I had to go back to myself, like, where was I? Where did I have to summon that courage? And so I used to tell those stories as part of a training class I did, and it was helpful for me to remember to go back and go, what was it happening? So those stories became part of the way I would kind of try to encourage the teams I worked with. And so then it just became, hey, I think I'll put this in a book, because here's what I saw. I saw people a lot in the companies I worked with who were great people. They saw a path to better, but they didn't have the courage to fight for it. For some of the things that, that permission granting didn't exist, and I remembered that. And so I just thought, hey, I've been there too. Can I offer a bit of insight, lessons learned, maybe some hacks that and trying in a way to be helpful. So having that mission about what you're trying to accomplish, I think helps you tell the story.
Yeah, I do. One of my favorite stories, and you think of Jack Welch, the icon,
Yeah.
and your story about him teaching you a lesson.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting. I don't know where Molly Rousey is in the room, but Molly has a saying. She said, because I'm a freight train, and she said,
well, you seem like a really cheerful freight train. Energetic freight train.
I have my moments.
Okay.
And she talks about being a passenger. Oh, are we getting feedback? A passenger train, bringing people along the way, and I have worked on that. So tell about Jack Welch.
Yeah. So when I left Jack Welch asked me to come from NBC to GE, And at the time, he was just becoming sort of CEO of the century. GE was one of these like top-run companies of the world. And he called me up to his office one day, similar to the Jeff Immelt story, and he said, look, you're just too abrupt. Here I was coming out of NBC. Like if we didn't make it on air, it was black space, and you were dead. So everything was speed, and here was Mr. Speed, and he was telling me to slow down. And he was like, you have to wallow in it. You can't show up in a meeting and then just collect your notes and leave. You got to stick around and say, how you doing? What's your family like? And he just saw me like with my checklist efficiency, and I'd leave because I was awkward. I was shy also. I didn't want to talk to people. And so he called me out on it, and he said, you're not going to be very effective. Well, apparently I didn't take his advice very well. And a couple of months later, he called me on the phone. His assistant got me on the phone, and then the line got disconnected, and I called back. I said, oh, I lost Jack on the phone. She said, I said, oh, I lost him. She said, no, he hung up on you. And I was like, what? And she said, no, he wanted you to know that's what you're like. You're very abrupt. And so I love that he took the time to teach me, and he used a sense of humor. Another quick, Jack, he was a colorful CEO that's been well written. If you went to business school, you've read case studies, because he was very colorful. He had this other line, and it was about candor and feedback. And again, I think I learned the value of feedback. He would say to you, you're either a pig or a prince. That was his method of feedback. Never a princess. I was never a princess. And if you did something wrong, he'd come to you and he'd go, you're a pig, and here's why. Or, you're a prince, and he'd write you a note. Maybe you'd get a spot bonus. But what I loved about it is you knew where you stood. There's something really, now I don't think you have to call people a pig. I would recommend you don't. Right, Jen, that's not going to work today, I don't think. Or really probably didn't work then either. But that kind of candor, so I think you can find teachers in unexpected ways. And you as a team leader, your job, I think, is to coach your team and find these opportunities without calling someone a pig.
Yeah. Well, good advice. I'll try that. So it's interesting, as you move up the organization, you have these, I look at Jack Welch, and I probably would be quivering in the corner. You find out how you need to communicate at an executive level, and it's quick, it's terse, so it's kind of, there was a little bit of opposite day in that messaging.
Yeah, exactly.
So how, as you moved up and you wound up in these top ranks, how did you change your way of communicating to get your message across?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because I grew up as a communicator. I wanted to be a journalist. I wasn't very good. I pretty quickly got into communications and then marketing, but I sometimes think communicators can be the worst communicator of your own message, right? I mean, it's like, the cobbler's kids don't have any shoes kind of thing. And so I had to put myself up to feedback. Am I being heard? I think you have to get used to saying the same message over and over and over again. But I think the more important thing is, as I put myself as this outsider inside, as I said, it was often bringing in the message that people didn't want to hear. It was a disruptive message from the outside. It was, hey, the competition is doing better than you think. Hey, our product stinks. Hey, this disruption's happening over here and no one wanted to hear it. And so there's a quite, even if you have the best speech on earth and no one wants to hear it, it's really tough. So to me it was, one, getting comfortable with keep saying your story, bringing other people in to tell that story as part of it, and asking for feedback, trying to say, hey, is this clear? I'd say the other thing you can do in kind of telling that story is taking people with you to go see it. Sometimes it's not enough to tell people, hey, this change is happening. You have to go as a team. One of the things I liked is we would do Friday field trips once a month, take a team together to go look at a disruption. It could be a new startup, it could be a new retail concept, it could just be an ad you're seeing on a street corner. Go together and see it. So I think some of those kinds of things, the communication has to be an experience, not just a set of words.
I love that. I love that. We, when my kids were little, we would have adventure weekends.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, my daughter's in the back there. Hi, Christine. Yeah. Christine's probably very thrilled to hear somebody else talk about blundering through.
Yeah.
I used to have orange dinners because I didn't have my act together for dinner, and they thought it was the best thing in the world, that I was very imaginative, and I was just
You are imaginative.
Imagine it forward. Cheetos,
So what,
orange juice, and carrots.
But see, I'd say you're a good storyteller. You're packaging, right? You're a good packager in that moment. You take what you got, you're turning it into a story. Hey, Christine, here's a story about orange.
Yeah. She still wants us to do it. So anyway, yeah, and we also talk about mistakes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've worn different shoes to big presentations. I've done a lot of messy things. In fact, if it wasn't for Monica and Kelly, I'd probably really be messed up. But one thing that we did was we burned a math test.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That's a great...
Yeah, because she's a great student. And,
Yeah.
and then I had a 15-minute conversation on don't play with fire. But anyway, I digress. One of the things, we had an opportunity to have dinner last night, and I mentioned, I've been called bossy. And Beth perked up, and she goes, I love it when people call me bossy.
I do.
Yeah, talk about that, because you probably didn't start that way.
Yeah, well, I was the oldest, and my brother and sister always called me bossy, and so I've kind of owned that from young age. But I know it's somewhat controversial in women's groups, but I like being the boss. So I don't mind being seen as bossy. I just, again, I think that's a little bit of kind of owning the story. Yeah, I'm bossy. Yeah. So. But with that, I think you're also hearing, what I tried to share a bit in the story and sharing with you now and in the book is a bit of a journey to kind of own some of that. I don't look shoddy right now. I know that. You're going like, she's not really this way. I don't look that way, and I had to overcome a lot of those things. I mean, I'd come into meetings and I'd leave a meeting without saying anything. That's not bossy, trust me. That's just mute. I'd come into a meeting, I wouldn't ask a question. You know that, like, you want to ask something and then someone else does, and you're like, oh, my question was better than that. But I didn't speak up.
Right.
And so, you know, I think kind of starting to own that and being the only woman often in the room and being the creative one and people going, oh, that's silly, that's absurd. And after a while, because if you're out in the world and you see these things, you start to own them. Mm-hmm. And so you start to say, yeah, I've actually seen this. Now, that gives me confidence. Now, I know you think that driverless cars are crazy or absurd, but I've actually seen them. And so I want you to see them. And that gives you a bit of a confidence. So if I'm a bit bossy about this idea, it's not about me. And that's the other thing. I think after a while you start to disassociate. It's less about your ego, hopefully. It's not like it has to be my idea. Like you have to buy Beth's idea. It's like this is a better way. And that story I shared about the fighting at NBC, I mean, it was really tough. It was also tough in a sense that it was a culture where people would sit in a room and tell you yes, and then they would leave and say, I'm never doing that. Mm-hmm. And that just can't be allowed in leadership teams. You have to be able, so with that kind of feedback and that owning, you have to create a space where people have discussions about that, where they feel uncomfortable, where you know, I don't like that idea, but okay, a decision's made, we're gonna all back it, but you do have to create that safe space to build trust, where people can share those expressions and say, hey, you are being bossy in this moment. And another feedback thing I got from some colleagues was they called me the dog from Up, because they say I always chase the shiny new thing. But they never told me that until kind of late in the process. And so that was a failure on my part for not encouraging a team dynamic where I was always throwing new things at them. And they were like, what? We don't know, are all these things important? Mm-hmm. So you have to create that space where people say, wait a minute, help me, that's not working for us. And so part of that story is a story of not team trust. And so I think some of that is trust the conversation and create that space for it.
I want to go, I'm a very positive person. StrengthsFinders tells me I'm very positive. But there is a moment in the book where you talk about your experience at NBC, and that name will remain anonymous. But you were bullied. You were physically bullied at one time, and you had the courage to talk about it in the book. Can you briefly talk about bullies and handling bullies?
Yeah, well, I'm going to set it up real quickly with just a scene setter. Get to the punchline. So because NBC was very visible, and again, I didn't do a lot of things well. We were digital, and I was like on the front page of like trade magazines, my hair blowing in the breeze, like digital's the future. And rather than building teamwork, I was proselytizing the message. And my colleagues were frustrated at that, all the attention and the money we were getting. And they started doing drive-by shootings. And if you're in New York, you know the New York Post, and they have this famous gossip column called Page 6. And one day I woke up and there was a gossip item about me in Page 6, and it said, "She's so lethal, she'll take out your kidney and you don't even know it's gone." In hindsight, that was kind of complimentary, but at the time it was not. But that was the warfare. I just want you to get a sense. People were leaking stuff to the press because we couldn't have these conversations inside. And so I share it in the book. One of the warring tribes the guy ended up running the network and being my boss. And I went to him and asked him, like, I wanted to make some change, and I wanted him to back somebody who he was very fond of, and I was making change in this guy's area, and he didn't like it. And he said no, and I said, I just really need your support. And he picked me up by the collar and threw me out of his office. Now, today that sounds a bit absurd, and honestly, it wasn't a Me Too kind of thing. He was just incredibly competitive, and I was in his way. And that was the environment at the place. And I wanted to call it out because that's what happens. We fight with each other. And I regretted the way I handled it, because the way I handled it, I went back to my office and I cried. And I was so frustrated and pissed. And I wish I could have gone back. I wrote in the book, I channeled like I could have been Sandra Bullock or in a movie, like going back in there in a like rom-com or something, but I didn't, right? And going back and said, don't you do that again. That's not acceptable. We're on the same team. But also, I hadn't cultivated that relationship. It wasn't just all my responsibility, so don't take that from what I'm going to say. But I knew this guy. I knew his family. I didn't say, let's go have coffee, let's go have a drink. Don't we have a shared interest in making this company better? He didn't either. And so I think we often in change lose sight of ourselves. And so if there's anything you take from that story, hopefully you're not in a situation where someone picks you up by the collar and throws you out. The media has since called him. He says it never happened. In my memory it happened, but who knows. Or else it happened every day with people and he just didn't remember it was me. I don't know. But the thing is, like, don't let it get to that, right? We're working on the same team, and it's about team trust. And can you set up that candid decision where okay, maybe he should have decided that the decision was going to be made, but we could have gotten to that place in a different way.
I want to go to the idea of nice girls. We're trained not to make noise, right?
Yeah.
And yet, in innovation, tension is required. And I kind of say, I don't like conflict that I didn't create.
You should memorialize
Yeah.
Franny Matthews. That's a good one.
But can you talk to me about that, getting comfortable with tension?
Well, I'm still not comfortable with it, so I think that's partly, don't mean you have to like it, you just have to do it. This ability of seeking out conflict because you know it's going to be better. Giving the idea to someone else, letting another team take it through, actually inviting in different points of view. Yeah. That is critical. If you're leading a team and you're not inviting in the critics or difference, you're not going to get to a better place. It's just essential. You have to create space for it. There are rules around it. There are ways to say, okay, we're going to create time for this. We're going to facilitate the right discussion. I like facilitated even red team, blue team exercises where you set up opposing points of view and you create the space. So I think there are formalized ways you can do it. But anyone who's in change, if you don't accept tension, it's not going to work. Not everyone's going to get along. And also that idea of this innovation lane, part of what you're doing is you're setting up challenger teams, challenger brands, challenger ideas that challenge the organization. So you're literally seeding tension and challenge to say, what if this is right? And so I think you need a practice to kind of create that if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I agree.
But it doesn't mean you like it. And
yeah.
I like getting along with people. I don't like conflict. And so I have to get over that in myself to not take it personally.
Yeah, having it at a different level. I don't have, the timer's not up, so you guys tell me when give me the, I wanted to ask you about a very special moment in the book that caused me pause. After 9/11 and GE being so big in New York, you were an advocate that you needed to do something. And you had a lot of ideas and that fine line of not looking like you're capitalizing on this. Tell me about that, because the ad that wound up out was so powerful.
Yeah, it was 9/11. Everybody felt helpless. We had a lot of customers who couldn't fly planes and a lot of things, and a few employees were killed. It was just horrible. And there was a moment, especially in New York, of everybody feeling they wanted to do something. We donated money. But, I was a storyteller and I was doing advertising, so it was like, okay, let's do an ad. Well, like, that's the worst idea ever. But it just felt like, what do we want to do? And so I called up the ad agency and said, give us some ideas. They thought it was the dumbest idea they'd ever heard, too. And they sent a stack of things, and on the bottom of the stack of work they sent was this incredible sketch of Lady Liberty rolling up her sleeves. And it was like, that's it. And so we just did a simple print ad that we thought channeled the zeitgeist of the moment that said, we'll move forward together. I forget the exact words. I should have tattooed it, but it was, basically, we'll move forward. We'll make this work. And it wasn't about GE. It was about just capturing this moment. And inside, people were very fearful. Why are you sticking your head up? We're looking like we're trying to monetize this moment. People called up my boss. He was my new boss, Jeff, at the time. Like, this is so dumb. This is horrible. That became a pattern, a lot of people calling him up, what Beth's doing. And he was like, let's give it a shot. And that became kind of our routine. And it really did seem to capture a moment that people wanted to hear. And a few days later, we went to the stock exchange as it opened. And most of the traders had taped it to their kiosks. And it just captured this moment. And so again, it was a nice ad, but it was capturing a moment, and that's what story does. And it was having a bit of courage, and that really is, to your original question, why I felt using the word courage in my book. I'm not the most courageous person you're going to meet. There's a everyday courage, and there's a run into the building and save the dying granny courage. But we all need to summon that everyday courage, and that's what I tried to document, sort of that path to finding it. The courage to take big acts. I share a divorce story, to the courage to doing something like putting an ad in a newspaper. These are courageous acts in small ways. And that's what business and team building and life depends on us to do. So I tried to just kind of channel that and go back to that feeling of staying up all night. Oh my God, I'm losing my job. Oh my God, the company's gonna look embarrassed. Oh my God, people are gonna say this is the worst thing ever. You have to go through that to get to the other side. And even today, I still feel that. So if you're sitting here thinking, oh God, she's been working 30 years, she surely doesn't feel that way anymore, I still feel that way. And that's often sort of a test of your courage. Do you feel that little butterfly or something physical for me that goes, I feel almost sick to my stomach, keep going. You're onto something. And so I think it's learning to kind of channel that.
Yeah, the gut thing is confusing because it's excitement and
anxiety. I talk about a job I took that everyone said I shouldn't have taken, but it was a gut check. I talk about a job I didn't take that everybody would think I should have taken, but I didn't take because it was a gut check. So I'm a big believer that part of your courage, it's that, you need data. And we're all here, it's about women in technology. You need data, but data reinforces the experience, the collaboration, the kind of knowledge that the team has that you need to bring out. That data just reinforces it. The data's not going to give it to you.
Right. I'm going to ask you one more question as we tee up. We're going to do a transition into some Q&A here. As I have gotten more mature, I have realized that my upbringing made a big difference on who I am. And I had the good fortune of being raised by wonderful parents, but I didn't understand how wonderful they were until I got older.
Until you were a parent sometimes.
So talk about your upbringing and how you feel that gave you the foundation.
Yeah, I was raised in a small town, as I've mentioned, 2 great parents, a teacher mother, a dentist father, and my dad's now an artist, so I've seen him change a lot in the course of his life. But it was a very nurturing environment. By all accounts, I should have gone forth into the world as the most confident person on earth. Small town, encouraging parents, I did well in school. But as much as I love that nurturing environment, it was also stifling to me. Because it was a place where everybody knows your name, and it was about if you didn't have your reputation, you didn't have anything. And so that bothered me, and it really instilled in me also this curiosity, this sense of wanting to see the world. So as much as it created me, and I'm still that small town girl, it propelled me in my curiosity. And I think my parents, I give a lot of credit to my parents, my mother the teacher, my dad the artist, to sort of encourage that curiosity.
Okay, are we set up for questions? All right, Melissa in the back, there you go. So you see the people